Hey there, I've done a bit of work lately about my steels. I've had some things in Everyday Commentary's website, and I've been talking to the lovely chap from Knife News just about my testing. So I figure I'm going to get some more questions about all this stuff. So I thought I'd do a bit of an acknowledgement and a bit of a FAQ even about my steel testing. I've obviously done a roundup video recently, which I probably should update again as I've done more steels. But this will just be some basic statements about my testing, what's right and what's wrong with it, really, and yeah, kitty, and sort of what I often get asked as well. So I'll be reading off a sheet of paper, so if I seem like I'm staring in some weird direction, it's because I'm holding my paper up behind just so I don't forget. So what's good and what's bad about my steel testing first? This is not the perfect way of testing knife steel. I don't know what the perfect way is, but this is just one guy's way of testing how knives go against rope and how that absolute edge lasts against rope. So if it's interesting to you, that's good, and if it's not, then I guess your search will continue. So the good things about my test are that I've got a few decent controls. So a control is something that remains constant in a scientific experiment. And I know it's a bit cringy to say I'm doing science. I find it a bit cringy, but it's what I'm kind of trying to do, I guess. So there you go. So my constants are, I put the same work sharp edge on the actual cutting bevel of the knife every single time. I use a work sharp knife and tool sharpener. I use the brown and then I use the blue belts. That's it. I don't use the green. I don't really have fancy belts. I put it in the kitchen knife guide. And any knife that fits in the kitchen knife guide, I'm happy to say it gets a very probably similar-ish edge on it. One question I often get is, what about the geometry behind that edge? So you've got, say you've got your V edge, what about the stuff that's up here? I'm pretty certain that the work sharp it removes a fair bit of material, and I'm pretty sure it does put a good millimeter of almost identicalness on each of these knives, because I guess I'll point you towards the Delica versus the Falkniven in VG10. Both VG10 knives, Falkniven is massively thicker than the VG10 in the Delica, right up to the, just where the cutting edge starts. It's a thicker convex edge. The Delica's a nice thin slicey. But I think they both did 75 cuts or similar, whatever the number was. Both very, very similar. So kind of point to that, and just lots of other similar numbers I've had when I've retested the same steels in different knife thicknesses. I'm pretty happy with the work sharp, making that absolute edge pretty uniform. Another good constant I have is I cut the same material, and I also have the same method of deciding when the test is over, which is just computer paper. The best thing about my test is, if you were so obliged, you could go and buy the exact same things, do the exact same test as me, and get your own numbers. And to be honest, I would love that, because then if you got different numbers to me, and then someone else got different numbers, we could put them all together and you could put a line through them, and that'd be your true data. So this is just one guy. Ideally, there'd be 20 Cedric and Ada guys doing the same test, and then you'd have a much more uniform bit of data. I'm not scared of that happening at all. It's absolutely fine. So the constants I'm pretty happy with. What's bad about my testing? It's not perfect. Absolutely not. The main thing I'm not happy with is that I can't factor Rockwell, because I can't shop for Rockwell. There's no, not every steel. There's some steels you just wouldn't be able to get up to 60, and there's some steels that don't sell any lower than 60. So if you could get everything to maybe 59, that'd be great, but then how do you shop for that? Makers don't even know what Rockwell's their steel is at sometimes. They say 60 to 62 or 62 to 64 in my Contago. Like it's, that's 3 points of differentiation that it could possibly be. So it's hard. I don't know what to say about that. It is what it is. That's why any steel tests, any hierarchical data is just going to be a rough guide at best. It's a guide. It's going to be a rough, good list of how, it's going to say, yeah, 8CR13 is way inferior to S30V. As long as your steel data is saying that, then yeah, there probably is reason for argument or suggestion in between. Absolutely. So Rockwell is probably the weakness in my testing. I would love to have exactly the same knife model in every single steel. The Mannix provides a lot. The Mule team would provide a lot, but they are just expensive and hard to find in Australia, and that is it. In terms of the geometry, back onto that, one thing I do notice, and this is just purely from my point of view, when the geometry behind that initial cutting edge is thicker, the edge seems to not be affected. So the actual time it takes till it stops cutting paper, but it certainly does make the task less enjoyable on a thicker knife. So that's probably one thing to note. Another thing is some knives I have used are shorter, and I do try and factor this in and try and use a rough, the same 1.5 inches of I try and make it so 1.5 inches of the blade is getting cut, but it's hard to sometimes. My 2 results I'm not happy with so far. The HAP 40 result, I would take that one with a pinch of salt because I used a man bug with that. And thinking back, I don't think I completely spread out the edge because I made a point of when I did it with the recent AEBL test, and that was a lot more effort to do it. And I don't remember putting in that same amount of effort with the man bug. So I'll test HAP 40 again with probably one of those knife center Enduras or something similar to that when I can get one. So that's that. Yeah, but the main thing I'm unhappy with is that just the Rockwell issue, and it's a big issue, and it's fine. I completely get when people say, "Hey, it doesn't factor for Rockwell, so I'm not interested." I'd say still be interested. Surely a little bit interesting, isn't it? Like this will give you a rough idea of how much rope your knife will cut, and isn't that says something, doesn't it? But anyway, another thing is obviously I'm cost and time limited. I just can't shop instantly for every knife, because the first comment is in every steel video, oh, can you do this next steel, can you do this next steel, and I have a very obvious list in my head of the ones that I haven't done yet. I've finally got some S90V thanks to those Cutlery Shop native 5s that have just come out. I've ordered one of them for that. Otherwise I was going to have to get a Benchmade 941, which was a huge amount of money just for these tests. So, you know, as it comes, I get it, but I really can't shop for steel. It's just doesn't happen. It's a lot of money as it is. I'm spending all of my my monetization money on rope. Really is. I spent $80 on a whole spool of rope the other day because I'm planning on redoing Maximet, which is going to use a whole lot of rope. Because as you've noticed, you've probably seen I'm starting to do it just more of as fun videos, the Unleashed sort of thing, where I get those steels, this is another bad point. Some steels just do not function well with a fairly polished microconvex edge. That's just what it is. So M4 is one, Vanitas 4 is one. You can see in the Vanitas 4 on the same knife where I've put it, the initial edge was work sharp convex, did about 230 or something, can't remember. And then I took that work sharp convex and made it a nice sort of raggedy V edge, did up to 295 or something similar like that. So a big boost. M4, even bigger. You'll have to wait for that video. Some steels just aren't the best with the polished workshop edge. And it's another thing, if you hear a lot of anecdotal evidence that this steel works better with a toothy edge, that's so often the word people use, it probably will. So just something to keep in mind. But that is about it. That is kind of all of the... Yeah, I'm just trying to say that I don't think I've got this nailed down. I'm not, I don't think you need to look at my numbers and then stop. There's anecdotal evidence, which, as I say, I've written an article about it as well. As I say, if the anecdotal evidence is good and it's consistent from a lot of different people, then it's probably worth taking into account as well. And then you've got other evidence from the Catra card tests. You've got Michael Christie, who he really dials in certain edge angles that he's really interested in seeing steels perform at. He's more about getting the best performance out of steels, which is awesome too. So lots and lots of sources you can use. Mine really is just how the steel goes cutting rope. I think it's a good enough indication for how it's going to work against abrasives. I try and keep things consistent, but really I'm definitely open to the fact that I'm just one person doing it, and true science requires a lot of people doing the same thing. So that's that. I'm always happy to talk it. Remember, it's not personal. I wish those zero tolerance 0450s and 0909, I wish they'd cut really well too, because I bought those knives, but I just couldn't get them to cut. Big point of contention. That was probably, I think, it's the video in these series with the most dislikes. People think I had ragged on zero tolerance, man. I'm not, man. I bought these knives. I spent my money on them. I want them to do well, but I just couldn't get them to. So I even backed up the edges a bit, made them less thick behind the edge to see if that was a thing, and it really wasn't. Like, it didn't make it perform anywhere near what the other S30s performed, until obviously I got the zero tolerance in 0220, and it did, which was cool. So I was happy with that. And then it was performing with its Kaiser, Chris Reeve, and LAPG brethren in that same rough number. Anyway, go on about that all I want. I've sort of given up arguing with the people in that comment thread, because I just got a bit, I think people just thought I was anti-ZT. I'm so not. If anyone who watches my channel knows I'm not, because I keep buying those damn knives, don't I? Anyway, have I got anything else written down I need to say? No. Yeah, so overall, this isn't about which steels I think is best. This is just more about my test procedures and how they go, in case you're interested because you've just read something on the internet or seen someone refer to me and these tests. this is just open acknowledgement about the benefits and the flaws behind the research. Thanks, dudes. I'll see you in the next video. And look at my cat. She's so dumb. Lemon. She's watching the bugs in the light.